So in terms of looking at FY24, I would just put the context in it that we are still working on this. This is almost 2 months ahead of where we normally would be presenting to the school committee. We are deep dive into basically loading our budget. We have not yet complete. We have a current preliminary estimated FY24 budget of between $280 and $282 million. I've put it in round numbers, and that is subject to change. So if I put an asterisk on that, I just wanted to put that out there. That would actually be a budget increase or need of 6.8 to 7.6% from our $262 million. We'll get into some of those drivers and some of the reasons why coming forward. The proposed budget increase right now with the override approved is 275.7. That equates to a 5.2% increase. And if the override is not approved, it's a $271.2 million increase of 3.5%. Again, making the point that the enrollment reductions would be certainly part of our reductions we'd make before these numbers take in effect. So in terms of just a kind of a graphic illustration of where we have what we're going to call a budget gap for right now, a preliminary FY24 budget gap. These are our ranges, $280 to $282 million. That doesn't change due to the override. You've got the impact of the override in budget one. This is if the override is approved, $275.7 million. If you take out the $2 million carry forward, that is a goal of ours right now. And again, that's something that that's an assumption. That's something that we're going to be working on and talking to you folks for. That brings you a gap between $2 to $4 million still. The budget number two, which we're going to focus on tonight, the override not being approved. Again, the $280 to $282 million gross budget needs of a budget increase of a little more than $9 million to $271.2 million. Again, that same carry forward goal shows a gap of $6 to $8 million. That's significant. On budget number one, even with the budget approved, this goes back again, showing that gap. We have the goal to maintain the current level of services provided to students and build a sustainable budget over time. What are some ideas? Some ideas are to increase fees, and it's something that would be coming forward to you folks and looking at our fees. We have not touched fees, I don't think, for more than 5 years. We did some athletic fee increases approximately 5 years ago. We would look at charter maintenance. We look at what that $410,000 and what that might mean, what if restoring that is if that's the best interest for us right now. We'd also talk about some additional risk assumptions. We certainly obviously need to make continued further targeted reductions in either operational educational areas if we need to. Budget number two, this is the override. Override is not approved. Again, this is showing the $6 to $8 million gap at the bottom line for Newton Public Schools needing to cut. I want to move into some of the drivers and why we're in this position. So one of the first things, and I think you're going to hear this loud and clear, is the growing student needs. I think it's evident that what we've heard and what we're all feeling and experiencing is very real. And so that is absolutely something that we've been talking about, are going to continue to talk about. The second one is rising costs and expenses. The third one is using the use of one-time funds to balance our budget. So there's still a lot of unknowns. The outcome of the March 14th override, our contractual costs, all three of our collectively bargained contracts expire at the end of the school year. The full impact of all the inflationary pressure that we're seeing. And then lastly, some of the state aid, Chapter 70, which is really the formula to get education aid into all districts and all our communities. Circuit breaker we've talked about, and certainly our grants. This is really a slide that is really a city slide. We want to give them credit. And this is really showing the buckets that are supporting Newton Public Schools. And I think it is important. I think the mayor's talked about this, that out of this $15 million override, approximately $11 million or 75% of this money is directed towards Newton Public Schools. So the two areas circled on the left-hand side, the blue ones, we've got Countryside at $2.3 million. This is the debt service vote, as well as the Franklin Elementary at 3.5. The reason, I think just to clarify for the difference in that, is that the Countryside Elementary School is part of the Mass School Building Authority reimbursement program. The costs, I think, are projected right now to be very similar costs for those projects, but that reimbursement from MSBA lowers the city's debt that it would need to take on. On the green side is the operational override, and we've highlighted the two main buckets. The 4.5 is really what we've been talking about tonight. That would be the infusion in the Newton Public Schools budget. That's $4.5 million. And I also think it's important to know that that $4.5 million would be embedded into our base budget, then growing at 3.5% going forward. So although it is one-time $4.5 million, it grows proportionally over time. $775,000. I think we know about the Horace Mann Elementary project, the renovation addition. And I also think it's worthwhile just noting as well that there's a number of projects in here, although not, maybe you could say they're not directly attributable to the schools, but the schools get the benefit. The fields, the parks, the playgrounds, the schools are a major user in almost all those areas. The sustainability and climate resiliency, the Pierce boiler would be a benefactor of that. That would be electrifying the Pierce schools boiler system, which is near the end of its useful life and moving away from an oil system. So again, a big piece of this override is directed to Newton Public Schools. Would we want more? Well, of course we would want more. This is the number that the city came up with and felt that they could live with and would basically balance the variety of constituents that they're looking at and for the amount of what taxpayers could actually handle. So two budgets will be developed. We've talked about this as well. This is part of the school committee budget guideline. Both budgets will include this baseline of a $9.2 million increase. That's the baseline 3.5%. Budget number one, the override approved by the voters, that includes an additional $4.5 million on top of the 3.5% increase in the Newton Public School operating budget. Again, that would be growing at that same 3.5% going forward. A budget gap remains, but it is smaller, and it's something that Kathy and I have talked about and have talked with central staff. That is something that we are going to work down as hard as we can. We think there might be some recommendations around fees and potentially some other reductions, but that is an area that we would basically look as hard as we can to make as few reductions outside of the classroom as possible. The budget number two, the override is not approved by the voters. This is going to be significant budget gaps and reductions. This will require extensive reductions to the educational services and infrastructure. And we're going to talk about what some of those would be from a high level at this point.
So looking here, in closing a $6 to $8 million budget gap, and that is if the override does not pass, we would look at non-personnel expenses, administrative and operations, personnel and expenses, extracurricular activities, athletics, fine arts, clubs, and lastly, your classroom and school personnel. And looking at non-personnel expense reduction areas, when you talk about building maintenance, you have summer projects. And when we're out there listening in the schools talk to us, whether it's painting, whether it's rugs, whether it's updating, facilities the best you can during summer projects. These are expectations. That would be reduced really to project work for life and safety mandated improvements only. Professional development, we would be reducing our system-wide professional development. Technology, devices and software, reduce our licenses, roll back the one-to-one technology program in grades K to 5, introduce a BYOD, which is bring your own device program in grades 11 and 12. And the reason we say that about grades 11 and 12 is our students in grade 10 have taken their MCAS test in 10th grade, their high stakes testing. So again, this is a possibility. We would look at non-core academic programs and contracted service providers. And when I finish this, I will share what it means across the board, because I hope people are understanding when you have that large of a gap. It is a percentage across the board, doing what you can to stay away from the very services for our students. Administrators, central staff, district and school-based supervisors, all at a time when it is critical that we're supporting our principals and what is happening in the classroom, and making sure that we talk endlessly about state-of-the-art curriculum, academic excellence, academic opportunities, all again rely on people doing the very work that I spoke about at the beginning of this presentation. Our support staff, custodians, administrative assistants, and transportation. It could be, again, a significant reduction. When we say to the transportation program, we are required by law to transport our K to 6 students within, is it
More than 2 miles.
more than 2 miles? So this is important, I'm sure, to families, look at your roads, your crossroads. This is a metropolitan, very busy city. And our children's safety is of the utmost importance and a priority to us. And we would have to look at, when you talk about structural deficits, if we had that large of a deficit. Extracurricular activities. And again, with our young people here, I don't want to panic people. It would be looked at as a reduction. So when you're looking at athletic programs at your middle and high school, you provide a robust program for kids to have opportunities for competition. You have freshman athletic programs, JV programs, varsity programs. We'd look at your music programs, the theater programs, clubs, and activities. And again, this isn't across the board. This isn't eliminating, but it is taking a look at, are there some clubs that you could reduce? Maybe the participation isn't as high. But I will tell you, I was speaking to a member of your community, and this was just, it made me really step back and think, having been a school adjustment counselor and knowing how important it is for some kids to have a place to go, to meet their peers, to be able to socialize. Maybe they're not the best athlete. Maybe they're not the best on the stage, but to just have that opportunity. And we were talking about your freshman sports, and I was told that that was a no cut. Students get the opportunity to try out volleyball, to try out field hockey, to try out all of those types of things. That is why you're the premier district. That is why you offer those opportunities. And the last one, the classroom and school personnel reduction areas, eliminating 40 to 50 educator positions, resulting in the following impact on our students. You would have larger class sizes at all levels, increased caseloads, more students to support with your social emotional learning, your SEL, mental health professionals, guidance, counseling, college and career support. It isn't that we wouldn't provide those, but again, when I heard the principal today at Mason Rice talk emphatically about having the personnel right there to support him, to support our students, during this time, that is what makes a difference. He's not sharing an adjustment counselor with another elementary school that might only be there a certain number of days a week. A decrease in elective options for students, wait lists for high school classes and specialized electives, increased free blocks and study halls at our high schools, and a reduction in academic and social emotional support systems that we continue to talk about, I would say, at almost every one of our school committee meetings and out in the meetings with our parents and our communities. So without override funding, across the board budget reductions to all departments, increased class sizes, reductions to the breadth and depth of programming for students, significant changes to staffing and structures, increased fees and other revenue sources, challenging to meet system-wide goals in our school committee budget guidelines that I spoke about actually at the beginning of this presentation. This has long-term repercussions, for our students. So with override funding, it provides the Newton Public Schools with critical funding to remain a premier school district, providing every student with a personalized learning experience, strong and engaging academic programs with challenging classes and coursework, robust and meaningful mental health supports, and modern, innovative, and readily accessible technology, not sharing a technology cart when you want to use that in your classroom.